national stage. The station reached the wider world with old-time hillbilly music and thereby attracted musicians and fans to this city, laying the groundwork for what is now the country music industry. The incredible 100-year history of the Opry and WSM. After the news, this is Nashville.
Sharing news and stories from the voices of Middle Tennessee. That's This is Nashville. Our show is made possible by Music City Prep Clinic. This is Nashville is in service to you. So if you have an idea for the show or feedback you'd like us to hear, leave us a voice message at 615-751-2500.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The highly watched economic report on retail spending in the United States shows retail growth slowed down a bit in September, up 0.2% from August. The report from the Commerce Department was delayed because of the recent government shutdown. Here's NPR's Alina Selyukh.
The federal data on retail sales is behind by more than a month, and it's showing consumers cooling off a bit in September as they continued to go out to shop and eat. Compared to September of last year, spending at stores and restaurants grew 4.3%, with people shopping more for clothes and electronics in the tail end of the back-to-school season, and they went out to restaurants and bars. All this lines up with a slew of positive sales reports from major retailers, including Walmart, Amazon, Best Buy, and Dick's Sporting Goods. The industry is now predicting another record holiday season, counting on the fact that people generally are employed and wages are still growing faster than inflation. Alina Selyukh, NPR News, Washington.
The U.S. has a naval flotilla off the Venezuelan coast, and President Trump has branded a group linked to Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro a foreign terrorist organization, a claim Maduro calls, quote, ridiculous. NPR's Franco Ordonez is tracking the Trump administration's actions striking boats in the waters near Venezuela. It deems drug trafficking threats to the U.S.
There's a debate whether striking Venezuela fits with America First. Now, the White House says that Trump is prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into the country, and that is America First. But going farther than that carries a risk of longer-term responsibility. Now, of course, there are cases where regime change arguably worked. Take Panama in 1989. But there are other examples, including Iraq and Afghanistan, where regime change did not go so well.
NPR's Franco Ordonez reporting. Women who stopped taking Wegovy and similar GLP-1 weight loss drugs just before or early in pregnancy faced a higher risk of complications, including preterm birth. NPR's Maria Godoy reports that is according to new findings published in the journal JAMA.
GLP-1 drugs have become increasingly popular among women of reproductive age, but women are advised to stop taking these medications before pregnancy because of potential risks to the fetus. Researchers from Mass General Brigham reviewed the medical records for nearly 1,800 pregnancies, primarily among women with obesity. They found that women who stopped GLP-1 medications right before or early in pregnancy also had a higher risk of gaining excess weight, developing gestational diabetes, and hypertensive disorders compared to women who did not take these drugs. The researchers say more studies are needed on the risks and benefits of taking GLP-1 drugs before having a baby. Maria Godoy, NPR News.
This is NPR. President Trump has issued a number of pardons since his return to office in January, but today was a big deal for the Turkey community. At an annual ceremony at the White House today, President Trump granted a Thanksgiving Day reprieve to Gobble and Waddle.
I shouldn't say this. I was going to call them Chuck and Nancy. But then I realized I wouldn't be pardoning them. I would never pardon those two people.
President Trump apparently referencing Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, two of Trump's most prominent political critics. A new feature on the social media platform X shows many influencers are not located where they claim to be. NPR's Jeff Brumfield reports it's raising questions about their identities.
The new feature was rolled out late last week. It allows users at X to see where different accounts are based, and not all is what it seems. One account calling itself American was based in Pakistan. Other accounts pushing politically divisive content were in Nigeria and Bangladesh. Darren Linville is at Clemson University. He says many of these accounts are stirring up political tensions for likes, follows, and ultimately cash.
In most of these cases, it's most likely just influencers who are trying to make a buck.
X appears to have suspended several accounts linked to such efforts. For his part, Linville welcomes the newfound transparency, which is increasingly rare to see online. Jeff Brumfield, NPR News.
The Dow has risen 545 points. It's up more than 1%. It's NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, where drivers can compare direct rates using Progressive's rate comparison tool. Customers can see options and rates side by side. More at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And the Tennessee State Museum Store, presenting books, locally made foods, apparel, and gifts inspired by Tennessee history and art, plus a wide selection of Preserve History t-shirts and related merchandise. More information at tnmuseum.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. The history of WSM and the Grand Ole Opry is part of our shared lore that connects us to the history of Nashville itself. It's not just the story of a life insurance company 100 years ago taking a chance with new technology and using it to help open doors for thousands of salesmen around the country. WSM, from its beginning, was interwoven with the city's marquee institutions: Fisk, Belmont, Vanderbilt, the Symphony, Hermitage Hotel, the Belcourt, and more. And as you'll hear this hour, pulling together these institutions set the stage for Nashville to become known around the world as Music City.
In Nashville, Tennessee, the country music capital of the world, here's the 981st broadcast of the Grand Ole Opry, tonight starring Cowboy Copas.
Yeah, that's the opening to the show in 1958, courtesy of the Country Music Hall of Fame archives, which houses the recordings that exist, or many of them. We are going to squeeze in as many stories, as much sound as we can about the Opry and WSM in this episode. And getting us going, our Nashville Public Radio's senior music writer, Julie Hight, who has been interviewing Opry members and historians this year and helping us understand this 100-year-old institution. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And Craig Havighurst joins us. He's editorial director of WMOT, our public radio brethren. He's also author of Air Castle of the South, an incredible history of WSM that also tells this much broader history of how Nashville became Music City. Welcome.
Hello, Blake. So nice to be here.
And a reminder, we are streaming on YouTube today if you just want to watch, and you can see my in-laws and family in the background in the window if you want. There is a studio audience here, much like the Opry. You know, maybe that's why we have that going on here. But it's at youtube.com/@WPLN. All right, let's start with this question we've gotten through our Curious Nashville project, where we take questions from listeners, go out and get the answer. We have not found the time to answer this one, so I think now is the time. Basic question from a listener named Deb, and I think the answer is more complicated than we might think, Julie. What does it mean to be a member of the Opry? Do you have to perform so many times? Do you have to have a hit? How's it decided, and what are the requirements? All right, Deb, you hit us with a lot there. Let's break this apart. What does it mean to be a member of the Opry?
That is a good question, and actually not an obvious one. I mean, that is evolved, the meaning of it has evolved quite a bit over time, because there was a time, certainly decades back, when Opry membership was something that was seen as really essential to helping an artist advance their career in country music. I mean, people wanted to come be on the show, and they might well get their first national exposure. I mean, it was really a star-making kind of platform. But now, I mean, it has evolved so much. The industry has moved in a different direction than the Opry in many ways. And so it's not necessarily a given that new artists building careers will just automatically value Opry membership. But it means now taking part in this ongoing, unbroken lineage and valuing that. I mean, valuing tradition, valuing being a part of this multi-generational family of performers. So it is an honor to be a member, and there's now ceremony around it that didn't exist way back. I mean, it is, there's this invitation and there's the induction, and it is so much more of a ceremonial thing. So, yeah, good question, Deb.
Well, what about, Craig, the requirements for you performing? Are you signing up to say, yeah, I'll be there a certain number of times?
Yeah, in the early days, the artists wouldn't have been anywhere else but there Saturday night. So they didn't need to have a requirement. Over time, I'd say probably way into the 70s, 80s, then the tours began to be bigger and artists, it was more of a choice to have to be in Nashville versus to be on a big stage in Oklahoma or someplace else.
Right.
So the tension, and then as they became big stars in the late 90s, it really became more of a source of tension. And the Opry would have to go, hey, Artist X, we know you're making bank out there on the road, but you do need to come back and there were some contractual obligations, or at least informal understandings that you do X number of shows per year. And then some other stars have been so passionately interested. Carrie Underwood comes to mind as somebody they didn't really, is there as often as she can be, wants to be there, wants to continue their thing. So it's evolved.
You're saying early on, you wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else on Saturday night because this is how you reach people.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, all right, Julie, to be a member, do you have to have been a hit maker?
Not necessarily, especially these days. I mean, I did a little audit of the members who've been inducted from 2020 to now, 21 of them. And really the vast majority are not in their hit-making era. Some of them have never had a hit-making era. I mean, there are veteran artists who've been inducted in the last several years, like Kathy Mattea, T. Graham Brown, and then there are others like Mandy Barnett, who has been known for the wonderful things that she does with kind of classic country pop and for playing the role of Patsy Cline. And the songwriter Don Schlitz, he wrote hits for other people, and the session musician, the harmonica player Charlie McCoy. I mean, those are not what you would think of as the traditional kind of inductees, but the mindset, the philosophy is really different these days.
So you talked to Opry's associate producer, Gina Keltner. She kind of used this word relationship a lot. Let's take a listen.
I think in most cases, the ones who really rise to the top for us as far as our relationships are ones who are familiar with the Opry, who do understand its importance, and early on it was important to them to be here and to establish a relationship. I'll use Carly Pierce as an example. Carly, very early on, she would do the Opry, and then the next day email me and say, okay, I'm ready to book the next one. That dedication and that mindset and commitment usually is very visible and felt.
All right, Julie. So we're hearing there like what it takes. You're in a relationship with the Opry. What does that mean? Is there criteria for becoming on the Opry? Or is it almost like waiting for your partner to pop the question?
Well, I have not been thinking of it in that way, but yeah, it is interesting. I mean, Gina Keltner mentioned the name Carly Pierce. And that's one example of a newer artist that they were, building a relationship with as Carly Pierce was rising to where she is. So it's not that they're not paying attention to new talent. They very much are, but there's so much more of that kind of the abstract stuff. I mean, it's so much more abstract than chart metrics. When you think about someone demonstrating that this is meaningful to them, it is something that they want to be a part of. I mean, just, making it a point to be there, performing over and over again as a guest, that kind of laying of the groundwork. So I also spoke with Dan Rogers, who is the VP of the Opry and executive producer, earlier this year. And I mean, he said something very similar, but he used the word commitment quite a bit.
4 words come to mind: career accomplishment, an active relationship. Like, have this artist been here and feel like, it almost feels like they're already a member sometimes, and you're just checking that box, like making it real. Can you see 3 years from now it kind of feeling like, oh, Ashley McBryde is just part of the tissue of the Opry? Lainey Wilson, how did we ever think we could go a month at the Opry without hearing Don Schlitz singing The Gambler. Wow, wouldn't it be great if Charlie McCoy was a Grand Ole Opry member so that he could come play on virtually anyone's set? So, accomplishment, relationship, connection, and commitment.
All right, so Craig, we've got accomplishment, relationship, connection, commitment. I don't know. Has the criteria for membership always been this reverential?
I would think so. I would say so. And I think that one of the kind of barometers of that I've been thinking of as I listen to Julie is that I think it's important to know that for, let's say, younger, developing, what we would consider Americana or alternative country, not aiming for the mainstream radio, there's never been a period where being able to be invited to play on the Opry or heaven, hope, be a member was uncool. All this time. So I think of like Joshua Headley. I saw him recently, he was celebrating one of his occasions to play. Caleb Caudle, not widely known to the general public, but, when he got a chance to play the Opry, he was overwhelmed. Sonny Sweeney, these artists who are in our kind of, roots world, they still regard it as the epitome of cool.
Well, is it a big surprise to them? It sounds like they probably have had to show their loyalty to the Opry over time. And yet it seems like the Opry makes a very big deal about it being this big surprise, even, catching people off guard with inviting them. And
there's playing the Opry, which is sort of what I was getting at. They want to be on it. And then there's, if you're there enough and you have this, you develop the relationship, you become part of the family, as it were, then membership becomes a possibility. And yeah, you see people break down in tears over being.
That doesn't mean it's a complete surprise, though, because there's a lot of kind of planning this out that happens behind the scenes. I asked specifically the most recent inductee, which is Kathy Mattea, because she really appeared surprised when she received the invitation from Charlie McCoy on stage.
And she's kind of been around.
But she said that, in fact, they had all these conversations about, well, who among the existing membership would be meaningful to you to participate in this process. So she suggested Charlie McCoy and Terry Clark. And I mean, Susie Boggess and Trisha Yearwood were also part of her kind of ceremony. And the surprise was that she was supposed to call Charlie McCoy out to play on a song with her, and she forgot. So he had to interrupt her and, interrupt her in the middle of a song. So she was genuinely surprised by that. So the timing and the way it's done is not always known, but they kind of know.
Okay, well, we have answered some of the very basic questions on Opry membership. I hope Deb is listening, or she listens to this later. We'll also put it out as a clip in the Curious Nashville podcast feed. Much more in this 100-year history, socialites and stigma, high-tech, and holding on to tradition. So if you're just tuning in, I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. Our subject today, how the Opry and WSM made it 100 years and helped establish Music City as we know it. And a reminder, we're streaming at youtube.com/@WPLN. All right, so WSM, Craig, stands for We Shield Millions, started by this life insurance company, National Life. But I learned from taking a look at your book again this week that they weren't the only insurance company, even here in town, that was starting a radio station. WLAC was Life and Casualty. Why did these insurance companies see radio as an opportunity?
There's more to learn about why WLAC, why Life and Casualty did a sort of, okay, we'll do this too. It was 1 year later. WSM goes on in 25, and Life and Casualty had its opening night in 26. And in fact, WSM actually took the night off to let WLAC have its own moment in the spotlight that night. And the two were competitors as companies, in fact, down to the point where when when National Life built its headquarters on Capitol Hill, the Tennessee Tower, they wanted to make sure that it was taller than LNC's skyscraper.
Oh, wow.
So they were kind of in that rivalry.
Well, Julie, we have this established idea that WSM is like this country music institution, but in fact, it was not launched at all as a platform for the Opry or even country in general, right?
That's true. I mean, the way that we think of why it matters now is kind of, the flip side of how it was originally conceived of, because it was this, started by an insurance company. They put all kinds of music on the air, all kinds of performers that they could get to come into the studio, which was originally in the office building of the insurance company. But that was also dance orchestras and a lot of kind of middlebrow and highbrow stuff, too. And there wasn't even a country genre that people recognized yet at the time. I mean, we're at the very beginning of American commercial recording, so hillbilly music was beginning to be used as a term, and there were other radio barn dances, so there was that notion of pulling kind of the old familiar songs and old time pickers and performers who'd come up in, playing dances and hoedowns, or would come from vaudeville or minstrelsy or that kind of thing. But all of that was kind of swirled together.
Right. And I think it was the first broadcast maybe that the Fisk Jubilee Singers were on. Is that right, Craig? And I even wonder, of course, for folks who don't know, that's a historically black institution here in town. This is 1925, 100 years ago. Yeah. Would it have been like a progressive thing to have the Jubilee Singers on?
The Fisk Jubilee Singers by then had such a international reputation because they started in the 19th century. They'd been around a long time, and of course, it was rotating students. It wasn't the same singers the whole time. It was an institution that I think people thought reflected well in Nashville. I could never put my mind put myself in the mind of the programmers who decided what was in, what was out, and they also would then hire DeFord Bailey, who we're going to talk about, to be on the Opry, because he was a known quantity. People loved his music and his harmonica playing. So I just think that they were looking pretty widely and ecumenically at the music situation as it was. The Fisk Jubilee Singers were a big deal.
Yeah. Well, let's for those who are unfamiliar, let's listen to a little bit of D. Ford on the harmonica. And that's a recording from the mid-'60s. I mean, like 40 years after he was first on the show. Julie, how did the Opry handle having black performers in the Jim Crow South? It must have been a complicated line to walk for them.
I mean, the Opry went on the air around the time that the color line was being drawn in music, because the early commercial recordings that were being made as scouts kind of moved throughout the South and rural areas identifying talent and recording them. They were saying if you are a white performer, you can record your hillbilly numbers for us. If you are a black performer, you can record your blues number for us, which was limiting to those musicians and was kind of erasing, the ways that they'd really been operating and, sharing, exchanging influence and material across the color line. And, there had been a black string band tradition, which DeFord Bailey's family was, a representative of here in Tennessee. So all of that was playing out. And obviously DeFord did not get to live out his career on the Opry. I mean, he was dismissed, and, much like all facets of commercial music and the emerging country music industry, then there was a long gap between DeFord and the next black member of the Opry, which was Charlie Pride. And between that time, there were a couple of blackface minstrel duos on the Opry, but they were not pulling in, black practitioners.
Right, which even the Opry, I think, got around to apologizing for it.
That is true. It is a necessary and important thing that we go back and re-examine all of this stuff. Yeah.
Well, we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into more of this history, including the iconic tower off Concord Road that beamed country music coast to coast. It's a 100-year history in 50 minutes or so. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And the Hal Allen Clinic, specializing in minimally invasive robotic spine surgery and laser brain tumor surgery. For 40 years, the neurosurgeons of the Hal Allen Clinic have been national leaders in brain and spine surgery. And Renewal House, providing care, connection, and recovery programs for women and their children. Learn more at renewalhouse.org. Join us for Marketplace, weeknights at 6 p.m. on WPLN, providing the most up-to-date economic insights. Marketplace is supported by Alliance Bernstein.
How do we make sense of what illness can take away from us? In her new novel, Patricia Lockwood contends with that question. Will There Ever Be Another You is inspired by the author's own journey with long COVID and the confusion and disorientation that accompanied it. We revisit our conversation with Patricia Lockwood next time on 1A.
This morning at 10 on 90.3 WPLN News.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. Well, we can only cover so much in this hour on WSM and the Opry's 100-year history. But if any of it whets the appetite, then get your hands on the book Air Castle of the South by our guest Craig Havighurst. We're also joined by Nashville Public Radio senior music writer Julie Hight, who has been covering this story up and down for us, for NPR, for The Guardian this year. We'll have links to that reporting on the show post. Craig, the story of the early days of WSM is so much about technological innovation and kind of having this signal that could reach much of the country. And so much of it has to do with one guy who I did not know before your book, which is Jack DeWitt. How did this hobbyist, kind of end up building the biggest radio tower in the country?
He's such an interesting story. He was not a flamboyant or dynamic man. He was very staid, but he was an absolute engineering nerd from the beginning. He was a radio hobbyist in the 19-teens, built his own tower in his backyard, built the first radio station that would broadcast in Nashville. It was a little rig at Ward Belmont School,
which was almost
like
just a almost clothesline or something, right?
It took varied forms,
yeah.
But yes, it was he built his own kits, and he actually built the first radio that Edwin Craig, who founded WSM for National Life, ever owned. So they got to know each other, and so it was natural that Edwin Craig would have Jack DeWitt on the master control the night they went on the air in October of 25. Jack was about 19 then, and then he would go and study at Bell Labs in New Jersey, which was the only place that could really train him to go to the next level of engineering. Meanwhile, WSM was applying for the coveted clear channel status, 50,000 watts of legal maximum power, and they did that in the very late 20s, and in 1931 they got their permission, and in 32 they got to build the tower.
And clear channel meaning what? No one else is on 650 anywhere in the country?
That's correct.
Wow. So that's the significance of clear channel. It means you can at least, at night with AM, reach much of the nation?
Yes, and I think you can still hear AM signals travel a long way, but in those days when the airwaves were so clear, these towers were designed. Yes, they could bounce their signal off the ionosphere and be heard in all kinds of surprising places. WSM in the 30s got fan mail from like the Yukon territories.
Wow, in Alaska.
Yeah.
Wow. So what was so special about the tower itself, the one that people would know if you've been down 65 near Concord Road?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, it's beautiful. It's architecturally beautiful, and they chose a design that was pretty innovative at the time, and not many were built, and the only other one that's standing today is WLW in Cincinnati.
Wow.
That sort of diamond shape. So it sits on one point, and it sits on a giant insulator that disconnects it from the ground, because that tower is actually charged with 50,000 watts of electricity. If you touched it, you'd die when it's running. And it has been, that's the amazing thing to me, is that it's been running near continuously since 1932.
Wow.
That I think of that tower now as a vintage instrument. I mean, it comes from exactly the same time that some of the people who play on the Opry would covet a guitar or a mandolin from that era, right? And so it was built so sturdily, and it's been maintained so well. And it was 878 feet tall originally. It was slightly shortened for various technical reasons. And the striking thing to me that was my favorite thing of learning it is that the waves, radio goes out over waves. Well, what do those waves mean? If we could see them, what would they be like? We think of a radio wave maybe as a little microscopic thing. The actual waves are as tall as that tower. The tower is its height because it's putting out 650 kilohertz, which is a short frequency and a long wavelength. And so the waves would be like hundreds of yards long if you could see them traveling through the electromagnetic sphere that surrounds the Earth. And so it was a very powerful thing. And the tower it also was powered by these giant vacuum tubes that were as tall as a human being. They were ginormous. They had to be cooled with water. So it was and now the whole transmitter fits in a sort of a rack.
Right.
Because it's built with standard, solid state transmitters now.
Well, the tower even started to find its way into the very music it was broadcasting, like a song Pan American by Hank Williams.
She leaves Cincinnati, heading down that Dixie line. When she passes that Nashville tower, you can hear that whistle whine. Stick your head right.
So what was Hank talking about there?
Yeah.
The whistle, hearing it on the radio.
It's such a great story. The tracks for the Louisville-Nashville Railroad ran right by the Concord Road Tower. And somewhere around the early 30s, the head of the L&N Railroad was dining with Edwin Craig and some of the mucky mucks from WSM and thought it'd be fun to promote our railroad on your station. What could we do? Hey, let's have somebody put a microphone by the track as it leaves Union Station and heads down the line. And it was so popular, people just loved this, that they did it again and again and again. It became a daily feature on WSM for about 10 years. And at certain points, they would celebrate anniversaries of the L&N's daily appearance. And they built, Jack DeWitt and his team of plucky engineers built portable shortwave transmitters. Then they used them for news reporting and all kinds of stuff, but they put it on the train, sent a signal to a shortwave receiver that Jack DeWitt had built, and then were able to put that live. So they were doing interviews with dignitaries on the train while it went by.
Oh, wow.
So that was a special feature. But as a daily matter, they would say, we're interrupting they'd literally stop piano players in the middle because they would have a signal saying,
can't wait on the train. Yeah.
The train's leaving now. It would be within, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. But it was never exactly the same. So they had to have a set of signals that would allow the engineer who would take a microphone out of a little house, put it by the tracks, and be waiting for the train. And then as soon as they saw it, they would cue, and it would come by and you'd hear it blow. And there were people who, the audience who sent mail in, who swore they could identify the individual driving the train by their signature whistle, stuff like that.
Wow. All right, so this era, we're kind of getting to the point where the Opry was making stars of people that we've heard of, like Minnie Pearl. Yeah, so Minnie Pearl, obviously an icon. That was from a 1951 broadcast. And then a few years later, this.
Just a short while ago, a young country singer signed in as a regular member of our Grand Ole Opry gang. And ever since then, his popularity's been growing and growing more than ever with all you folks and with all of us who have come to like him and pull for him so much. Let's say hello to a friendly fella by the name of Johnny Cash, ladies and gentlemen.
He goes on to play Walk the Line, but the music, we'll leave that there. Julie, was the Opry, this is like mid-50s there, was the Opry by that point kind of making stars, or were the stars being drawn to the Opry?
Both, really. I mean, those are, you're certainly, you just played a couple of examples that their profiles were raised considerably by being on that show because of the reach of the clear channel signal that Craig was talking about, and because they, got a national segment of the show by then. So it was a really important platform for performers. And there were so many performers, like imagine Roy Acuff, who wanted so badly to be on the show, and knew what it could do for his career, that he came and auditioned over and over and over again and was turned down many times before he actually, made the show. And then it really catapulted him to stardom, and he became such a definitive member of that cast for a long time. But the Opry was not the only radio barn dance of the time, not the only successful one. So there were other big ones around the country, and Louisiana Hayride, obviously in Louisiana, there were artists that began building their profile and their career on that show and then came to the Opry, including Hank Williams and Kitty Wells, many others too. So it kind of worked both ways.
Well, if you're just tuning in, this is Nashville. I'm Blake Farmer. We are cruising through 100 years of history on the Opry and the station that started it all, WSM. A reminder, we're also streaming today on youtube.com/@WPLN. Craig, technology's changed so much over time. AM obviously started being replaced with FM. No one's listening to this broadcast on AM, on FM. So why didn't WSM make that switch to the more modern signal?
One historic note is that Jack DeWitt put an FM signal tower on top of the tower in 1941 before anybody knew what FM was, but he wanted to be on the cutting edge, so he created an FM station that ran for several years, but then it folded. So then you get into the 70s, and because WSM had this legacy, this unbroken chain, and this role in country music and this role in Music City, USA, they became quite conservative about that legacy, and there was no reason to change. Just it kept going on. So by 2000, then the pressure is really on, and all of the other music Clear Channel AM stations had switched by then to talk sports formats because the fidelity doesn't work. And
FM's better for music, right?
FM is better for music. It's stereo and it's higher resolution. But then a new CEO of the Gaylord Company began to explore the idea of why is this AM signal broadcasting country music, old traditional country music, could we put this to better use and more better economic use? So they got quite far with some talks with some sports syndicators. And I was at the newspaper at the time, the Tennessean, and got word from somebody in that sports realm that WSM AM was being considered to have its country music, its Grand Ole Opry turned off, and all that moved to WSM FM. When we broke that story, the news did not go over well with Nashville's country music loving community or the stars. And you had people like George Jones protest and Vince Gill protest, and it became a real to-do. And Gaylord sort of backed off.
So was it your scoop that kept 650 AM?
We will never know, but I did break the story along with Brad Schmidt. I would like to give him credit because we'd worked on that story together.
Well, God bless Brad Schmidt. Julie, the Opry itself, the show, the Opry, has experimented with new technology. I mean, you can certainly find the Opry all over social media and such, especially these days. But it does seem they've also been kind of tethered to tradition and maybe slower to go high tech. Talk to us about that.
I mean, that paradox has really been part of the Opry all along. Cutting edge technology has been dressed in tradition and nostalgia even. I mean, at the very, very beginning of the show, there were already songs and kind of banter from, the MC and the performers that were romanticizing the good old days and, just picturing the old ways and the old home place and that kind of, this nostalgia for the past. I mean, that was at the very beginning. And then they were also using that really cutting edge radio technology and innovating in that way. And I mean, all along, they have been evolving and adapting and doing different things with television at different points in time. And putting the show on streaming platforms. I mean, so people can live stream it. I don't mean on Spotify, so they can live stream the show. But I think a good symbol, a good metaphor for that kind of paradox is thinking about the backdrop that was created recently that still looks like the traditional red barn, but is made of LED screens. So you can do a lot with it, but you can also just let it look like a red barn, both at the same time.
Well, there it is, like right in one image, modern technology with the past. Well, we're fortunate to have the general manager from WSM be on in just a moment. But Craig, talk to me about this point that like so much of what the station does, even what the Opry does, operates almost like a Hall of Fame and a museum. Is it seen that way now?
I've often used the comparison of the Ryman Auditorium, which is owned by the same entity, right. Ryman Properties. And we can see how the Ryman reflects the past, present, and future of music. And I feel like there was a stretch where WSM, when I was doing my research on it, was trying to figure out what role it was going to play. I feel like in recent years, it has found its footing in that place, that liminal space between the now, what could be, who's emerging, where is this trend going, why is Americana producing stars now, and tending to these legacy recordings and this sort of library. But I think that's the country music and the bluegrass mindset. We who love this music, we wouldn't know what to do without the records that were made before we were born. They're priceless. They informed the artists that we love now. They were their key influences. And those folks are going to influence somebody else. And that heritage passing on is just core to the value system. And I think WSM's reflected that really nicely.
Well, Craig Havighurst, author of Air Castle of the South, and Julie Hight, Nashville Public Radio's senior music writer. Thank you so much for sharing some of this history with us. And I know we'll hear more from Julie in the coming days. We're going to take one last break. When we come back, we're joined by a longtime Opry announcer and the man who calls the shots these days as the GM of WSM. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and AllianceBernstein, built on the culture of knowledge and innovation to help advance the financial success of their clients. AllianceBernstein.com. AllianceBernstein is not affiliated with National Public Radio. And David Lusk Gallery, presenting Red Grooms, Tennessee Foxtrot Carousel, original drawings, carvings, and new wall paintings celebrating the carousel, October 30th through December 20th. More at davidluskgallery.com. And Zander Insurance, an independent agency, working for their clients by helping them find options for their personal and business insurance needs for nearly 100 years in Middle Tennessee. More at Zander.com.
It's the season of lists. Ingredients for holiday meals, gifts for loved ones, gatherings to attend. There's just one more thing to add: your support of WPLN. Give for all the reporting you're thankful for at WPLN.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. It's an homage to WSM and to the Grand Ole Opry. WSM started in October of 2025, on my birthday, actually. Just 6 weeks later, the first broadcast of the Opry, though it didn't have a name at that point. It will be 100 years ago this Friday, November 28th. There's a special broadcast Friday night, and of course, I assume you can listen live on WSM, as always. As always. Okay. Sorry, Eric, I haven't introduced Eric yet, and but yes, it will be live on WSM. The Opry may have started as an afterthought for WSM, but it is now central to the enterprise.
And now stay tuned for National Life and Accident Insurance Company's Grand Ole Opry.
Your Grand Ole Opry.
WSM Nashville, Tennessee, presenting the Grand Ole Opry. Let her go, boys.
The Grand Ole Opry starts in exactly 3 minutes on WSM Radio.
Well, one of those voices there may be from our guest here, Kyle Cantrell. Was that you on one of those?
No, I'd like to think it was, but it wasn't. There were some great voices, though.
Well, he was announcer for the Opry for 18 years, worked in WSM management as well. Welcome to This is Nashville.
Thank you.
And Eric, who I gave him a nice false start there, that was totally on me. Eric Marcum, content director and general manager of WSM. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so Eric, does every Opry broadcast air live on 650 these days?
It does.
So even if there's multiple shows in a week, they're all airing?
Absolutely. 2 shows. Usually we start at 7 o'clock, take about a 30-minute break, get those 4,400 people out, get the next 4,400 people in, and start show 2. We carry both.
Does WSM still broadcast? I assume it does, over the beautiful tower in Brentwood that we were talking about?
We do, yeah.
So do you know these days, like, how many people are actually listening to the AM broadcast around the country?
That's difficult to really pinpoint, and it's something that the world within, say, Nielsen subscriptions is
So
still
Nielsen is sort of the rating system where people are walking around with these personal people meters that catch a signal from all of our radio signals to say, estimate how many people might be listening to this thing.
Yes, in a diluted form. It has a small sample size of a particular city, and then they basically calculate that based on the total number of people there and then give you a rating. And then a lot of times the radio stations then take that rating and go try to get sales. But that is the closest way that you can figure out what your number is. It's an outside source telling you how many listeners based on a fingerprint that they put on your radio station. Now, with modern technology, if somebody clicks on your app, you can get more information faster.
Right. Well, is there any more sort of anecdotal evidence for how broadly people are listening to 650 AM these days?
I would say just real-time listener feedback.
Well, that's what I mean, comments. Somebody's saying, I'm listening right now. They don't have to send you a letter anymore like they used to. They can chime in somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. Anywhere via email. They can call the hotline if they have that number, or just the radio station itself, or just communicate with the DJs live and in person. There's so many different ways to communicate through social media, but lots of ways to stay in touch with our team.
Well, so Kyle, when you started at WSM, it was still owned by the founding company, National Life, if I understand correctly. So, what changed once it changed hands, or you weren't in the business of selling life insurance policies around the country?
Well, interestingly enough, not much. We actually had sort of a hand-picked guy who bought the company, who bought the WSM properties, which at that time included WSM AM and FM, the Nashville Network, the Opryland Hotel, the Opryland Theme Park. All of this was one big package. And the guy who bought it was a guy named Ed Gaylord, who was a lifelong broadcaster, a newspaper man as well. And he bought it as a private company. And his marching orders to those of us who had been National Life employees were carry on. And whereupon he left town. Bud Wendell, who was the CEO of the company at the time, remembers taking him to the airport and saying to him as he was getting on his private jet, "Is there anything you want me to do?" And he said, "No, just keep doing what you're doing, and if I need anything, I'll call you." And that was all. And so with Mr. Wendell's leadership, he'd been a former Opry manager and had been associated with the station for a long time. He knew exactly what to do, and we just continued on the way we always had.
Wow. Well, if you're just joining us, I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville, 100 years of history in 50 minutes, all about WSM and the Opry. We're also streaming video at youtube.com/@WPLN. Feel free to hop in the chat if you want to shout out our guests or even ask a question. We might be able to work that in. So, Kyle, I read that during your time, WSM maybe was making a bit of a conscious decision to keep it classic. Like, how did that start to shape the station, maybe becoming more this destination for classic country and old-time music?
Well, you were talking earlier about, why the Opry never moved to WSM FM or an FM signal. There was quite an interest in maintaining the traditions of the Grand Ole Opry. By the time I got there, we were starting just as a local radio station to feel the heat of the FM competition. AM radio was still very strong in the early 80s, but the music was moving off of AM. And so there was a conscious decision made to preserve that, to continue to emphasize country music and continue to emphasize the Grand Ole Opry. So much so that by the time we got into the 90s, the decision was made for us to even take it in a more classic direction and focus more on traditional country as country music itself was evolving. And so the Opry was sort of reflecting all of it, but WSM AM and its other programming was focused more on the tradition and emphasizing that.
Well, I thought it was such a beautiful image that Craig Havighurst was talking about, the tower, this AM tower off Concord Road itself being almost this instrument, this nearly 100-year-old artifact that you'd want to preserve. Eric, how does WSM navigate that tension between tradition and evolving to meet audiences where they are?
Well, it's fascinating. We oftentimes see ourselves as a direct reflection of what you see standing on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. Somebody like Bill Anderson, who is 6+ decades as a member of the Grand Ole Opry, standing on stage with somebody who's making their Grand Ole Opry debut. Somebody bought a ticket to see that person to make their debut because they were a fan of them, and they were being introduced to Bill Anderson for the very first time.
Right.
That person is sitting next to somebody who bought a ticket to see Bill Anderson and is being introduced to that debut artist for the very first time. So while your WSM announcer is standing on stage telling people to tune in to WSM to hear the stories and the memories of what are the history that's being made right then, it's almost like the Thanksgiving table. Everybody's welcome. And tomorrow, you got a pretty good chance that you're going to hear one of those WSM announcers on our morning show talking and reflecting about the previous night's show.
Well, thank you for teeing me up for, telling people that if they missed Whisperin' Bill Anderson on this show yesterday, he was so moving. Man, I can't believe that after 65 years, he's still performing, for one. But also, he just had such great things to say, made us laugh, even tear up a little. It got misty in here, so watch out. Watch out with Whisperin' Bill. So you talk about, that the next day after the Opry show, you might have folks on the morning show reflecting on their show. I mean, can you talk about how the Opry really has become the core of what WSM is, even though it started as this little, sideshow on Saturday nights?
Yeah, it's interesting because from the outside looking in, we had a conversation with E.W. Bud Wendell just probably a few months ago about the state of WSM and the Grand Ole Opry in the 60s and 70s, before, like at the peak of the Opry at Ryman Auditorium, before it moved out to what would eventually be Opryland Theme Park and eventually the Gaylord Opryland Resort and Convention Center into the new Grand Ole Opry House, where it really became a business. It was just a bunch of hillbillies on a Saturday night on a radio station that was trying to find its way in making revenue, finding a way to promote National Life, finding a way to promote all the insurance companies that came or went before. But in that era, it turned into a business. And then WSM found its way, of course, to sell revenue, but the Opry grew while maintaining its roots on WSM radio. And then now you have a point in time where, of course, without the artists, the Grand Ole Opry doesn't necessarily have a voice. So your WSM personalities are the storytellers when the artists aren't there. The artists are able to go on shows like this and tell their stories and reflect on their memories or go on their social media pages. But if they're not on that stage, typically the only person telling that story is your WSM personality.
I hadn't thought of it that way, that you're saying like the Kyle Cantrells and all who come before and will come after are kind of making sure people understand the significance, why there is reverence toward the institution. Did you feel like that was your job as an Opry announcer?
Oh, absolutely. And I was so into it just personally before I got to the station that I felt like that's what I had to do. And I always talked a lot about the Grand Ole Opry. It's interesting, you were talking about the move, Eric, from the Ryman Auditorium to where the Opry is staged now. There were a couple of points in the Grand Ole Opry's history that WSM was considering eliminating it. One was in the late 1950s when television and big-time radio were sort of trading places, and these big radio shows were going off the air, and the audience was falling off and so forth. And Edwin Craig reportedly said, "We will continue the Opry if no one shows up."
And this is the National Life executive who started the whole thing.
Right. And then in the late 60s, when it was becoming apparent that the Ryman was going to come down on everyone's heads if something wasn't done about it, but yet it was so challenging to be able to find the land to expand the building and all of that, there was a lot of talk about, is this thing really worth maintaining? This is going to cost a lot of money to continue this because we've got to get out of that building and build another facility. And fortunately, through the efforts of people like Mr. Wendell and Irving Waugh and others, it was decided that the Grand Ole Opry, no, it's going to continue. So I really applaud them for making that decision over the years. That's why it's lasted 100 years.
It does seem like you also been very responsive to fans from the beginning. Like you were getting, it was this little bit of what WSM was broadcasting early on, but you were getting all this fan mail. And it's like, I guess we got something here. And so you sort of build on it. All the way up to, let's see, the episode in early 2000s where there was a consideration of moving it to FM off 650 AM. There's kind of this outcry. You're listening to the people. Eric, is there something to that it's like we'll give the fans what they want, even if there might be better business decisions to make?
Sure. I mean, WSM, its primary reason for being around is to be a public service.
Really? I mean, as part of a big corporate enterprise, was a public company, I guess. Is it now Ryman Properties? Is that
Ryman Hospitality Properties Incorporated?
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, it's got a bottom line, obviously, but you're saying there is this public service mindset.
Absolutely. At some point, if ever there is a disconnect of the internet line, it goes down. WSM is there for you. You pick up your radio. If the storm hits, electricity goes out. We have ways to stay up, and WSM will provide that message for you.
Right. Well, it's not cheap to run a terrestrial broadcast. I mean, even here, we sort of did the math on our AM station, and ended up selling it off a few years ago. Can you envision a day when WSM is no longer broadcasting on 650 AM?
Hopefully not while I'm there.
That's a very safe answer. I like that. Kyle, you've been part of these 100-year anniversaries, all year. I mean, because it's and I'm sure it'll go on beyond this week when the Opry celebrates on Friday. But what have you learned about WSM that maybe gave you an even greater appreciation for this institution you've loved for decades?
Well, I left the station 23 years ago as a full-time employee, and just to get called back and be a part of this 100th birthday celebration that we've had at WSM has been a tremendous honor for me, and I want to thank Eric for allowing that to happen. But what I have seen, even more than I understood when I was at the station, is just how important an institution this is. And to think about a world where the Grand Ole Opry might not be on 650, or it might take some other form that's completely unfamiliar to its original purpose. I think that's something that is so inconceivable to our audience and to our city here and to really all of America, because these things have become great institutions. There have been a lot of radio stations, successful clear channel radio stations, very successful in their field of broadcasting. But there's only one I know of that has had the cultural impact that WSM has had. And the Grand Ole Opry, of course, as a program on the station, in turn, has that same kind of impact.
Well, Kyle Cantrell, former Opry announcer, and Eric Marcum, WSM general manager, thank you so much for joining us. Here's to another 100 years.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. If you missed yesterday's show, we spent it all with Whisperin' Bill Anderson, who has been an Opry member longer than anyone else. He really put membership into perspective while making us laugh, talking through his life lessons, getting a little misty about it all. Listen in your podcast feed or at thisisnashville.org. Also, if you need more Opry today, like right now, the cool corner of this building is going all Opry during the Emily Young Power Hour. That's 2 o'clock today and tomorrow. All Opry music over the decades on 91.1 WNXP. Today's episode produced by Julie Hight and yours truly. Directed by Mary Mancini. Our board operators, Liv Lombardi. Masterminds behind that theme music are LaRange and Namir Blade. And the conversation does not have to end here. We got a sweet email yesterday that came to my inbox. Thank you so much. You can comment, tell us what you want to hear on the show by leaving us a message at 615-751-2500 or find us on Blue Sky and Instagram and X at This Is Nashville. I'm Blake Farmer. Go in peace.
At Harpeth Hall, every aspect of the school experience is designed with girls in mind. The student council president is a girl. The robotics team leader is a girl. The soccer captain is a girl. Harpeth Hall knows how girls learn best and affirms that every day, every girl is a leader. Learn more about admission and financial aid at harpethhall.org. Harpeth Hall, where girls in grades 5 through 12 learn to think critically, lead confidently, and live honorably.
This is 90.3 WPLN.
Nashville Public Radio.
And 91.7 WHRS Cookeville.
Nashville's home for Morning Edition and NPR News.
WPLN.org is where you can find more from WPLN News, including the Nash Villager, your human-powered newsletter and podcast, exploring Nashville news and history. Subscribe to both at WPLN.org.
Funding for Here and Now comes from MathWorks, creator of MATLAB and Simulink software, accelerating the pace of engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com.
From NPR and WBUR Boston, I'm Robin Young.
And I'm Scott Tong. This is Here and Now. Coming up, Venezuelan exiles in Florida urged the Trump administration to remove Venezuela's authoritarian leader, Nicolas Maduro.